So the project for this week, we're going to replace this plastic deep sink, floppy, flimsy thing, with a concrete deep sink. So this is the base. I've already formed it up and poured it. This is where the drain's going to go. It's where the hoses are going to go, and it's going to slide right in there and replace this deep sink. Now I've made the form for the actual sink portion itself. I've got to put some reinforcement in there and fill it full of concrete. Now this is actually, the form is upside down, so this surface right here is going to be the inside bottom of the deep sink, and it's got a 1/4 inch slope all the way to this surface on all 4 sides. You can see here, this is a regular drain for a vessel sink, and I have it set on the bottom with the rubber gasket with some tape around the outside so I can remove this after it's poured and formed, and it'll fit perfectly. You can see inside that there's 1 screw holding it down to the surface. So that's not going anywhere. So here's the wire mesh that we're going to be using to reinforce this form, reinforce the concrete. So we're going to go ahead and cut it to size and tie wire this thing together, and then we'll have a good solid reinforcement for the concrete. You're going to want to make sure when you size this thing and you form it that, keep in mind when you pour this, you don't want this wire mesh to be protruding anywhere through the concrete, so you don't want it touching any of the sides of your form. And as we pour, we're going to raise this thing up off of the bottom so it sets where it needs to be. Okay, we got the reinforcement cage all together, and now it's time to mix some concrete. We're going to go ahead and mix 2 bags of concrete at a time. These are 60-pound bags of high-strength concrete mix. Start shoveling that concrete into the form, and as you can tell, we keep lifting the steel reinforcing cage up to the surface, just below the surface, which is actually the bottom of the sink. That way it will give it the most tensile strength that we need to keep this thing from cracking or flexing. As I was settling the concrete down in with the vibrating sander, you can tell over here in the left-hand corner up front that the form actually gave way, and I didn't notice it until a few minutes later that it had actually given way, and we had to put some reinforcement in to keep that form from falling apart. So in retrospect, I would have beefed up this form a little bit more. We were concerned that we weren't going to be able to salvage this, but it ended up working out okay. After each layer of concrete, we're going to use I just use an electric sander, something that gives a good vibration, and that settles that concrete down into the form and brings the bubbles up to the surface. That way you don't have a lot of bubbles in your finished product. So we had a little problem down here. We had a kind of a blowout. So you see in the time lapse, I had to reinforce this. We'll see how square it is when it's done, but I think we'll be able to salvage it. We just got to sit and wait for it to harden up, and we'll peel the forms off here in about a week. Started pulling the forms off. Got the outside forms off. Now we're working on the inside forms. You're going to want to take your time chipping away at these inside forms and not to use too much leverage against the fresh concrete. You don't want to crack it, and then just start chipping away at it. Now it's time to clean up this mess so we can move on to the next step.
So we're going to go ahead and pull the drain out so we can set the sink. You see here in the back, I'd wrapped it in masking tape, caulked it all off, screwed it down, and then I smeared it with some Vaseline so it would release from the form. All right, I'm reaching around the back here and see if it'll push through. It's coming. There we go. Now that thing's perfectly formed for a sink drain. Perfect. So what I have here is an 1.5 inch diamond hole saw, and I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes for the faucet. I've got a template set up here so I don't have to have that center auger bit, and we'll go ahead and get started on this.
Just take your time, use plenty of water out of a squirt bottle, and medium speed, medium pressure.
All right, so here's the base, and we've slid it into place where the old deep sink was. And we're going to go ahead and level it out.
Use this little piston jack and some 2x4s and do a little back and forth until I get it level.
There we go. It's level. And now we're going to go ahead and get some grout and fill in the gaps underneath.
This sink weighs approximately 500 pounds, and as you can see here, we're going to use some creative leveraging to get this sink up on top of the stand. It took about 45 minutes to get it moved up there. Our biggest concern was really safety. We tried to make sure that we weren't in any pinch point where if this thing collapsed or the boards broke, that this sink came down on us. I wasn't as concerned about it coming down and cracking the sink. I just didn't want it hurting me or my wife. So at this point, we've got it just about past center on those boards. We're going to do a little test run and see if we can lift it, and it works. So we lifted it up, put it on the sawhorses, and let gravity be our friend and just kind of slid it down onto the base. And then we had to try to figure out how to get the 2x4s out from underneath it, but we ended up getting it.
Well, as you can see here, the sink is finished. It's installed. It works. No leaks. I've sealed it with a 50-50 mixture of beeswax and mineral spirits, and I've rubbed that into a really nice polish. It's nice and thick. You can feel it. The water beads up, smooth. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Everything's pretty square. So it looks like this project is complete. So from Stonebrook Adventure, till next time, bleep.